Welcome to this week's question and answer session, as well as open office hours. We have a really great question today, and that comes from a leader, Keisha, who's asking the question, as a seasoned leader, what specific behaviors and traits do I believe have been most crucial for success in today's changing business landscape? Well, that's a great question. I'm your host, Dr. Sherilyn Payne. I'm a leadership and culture expert. My expertise is really in helping organizations to transform so that they can actually maximize potential performance and profitability. So today we're answering Keisha's question around what specific behaviors and traits do I believe are most crucial for success in today's ever-changing business landscape? That's a really great question. You know, with the pandemic, we saw that the skills that are needed for today are greatly different from the skills that we needed yesterday or pre-pandemic, as I like to say. It was actually a study by McKinsey. And of course, if you know who McKinsey is, they're a leading management consulting firm. And they actually said that 90% of executives believe the ability to manage change through ambiguity and uncertainty is the most important leadership skill today. And I agree with that. I think that we have to really understand that the landscape is constantly changing, right? So we're seeing new technologies such as AI being introduced into the workforce. We're seeing that leaders are also required to actually do more and to work with less. And so they don't necessarily have all the answers. And so I absolutely agree with what McKinsey is saying. You have to be able to manage through ambiguity and uncertainty. And that's a trait that I've seen that some leaders actually, not just leaders actually, but some people actually struggle with. I remember years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I was deemed a change champion and in a change agent. And I really didn't understand at that time, what did that truly mean for me and the organization that I was working at? Well, since that time, I've come to understand exactly how I'm wired and what I'm good at. And one of the things that I found is I'm really good at connecting the dots, taking the pieces of, what's happening, the big picture, as well as the immediate need, and marrying those, coupling those at the same time to be able to produce an output or an outcome that really exceeds leaders' expectations. But how did that actually happen? It happened because I got comfortable with managing through ambiguity and uncertainty. And I would like to say that relocating from one state to another state multiple times actually assisted me with that, right? So you have to kind of get used to figuring things out and not necessarily having the resources that make it easy for you to actually do some things. So that's going to be absolutely hands down, I would say, being able to do that. You've got to be able to figure things out. You cannot have all of the answers and expect to have all of the information, all of the answers, all of the data, and for it to be perfect before you make a decision. You've got to be able to make some predictions and really think through, what will this actually mean? What will be the trickle down effect of this particular decision, right? And being able to look at what you do have, assess what you do have, rely on your intuition to be able to help you make the most important or the best decision at that particular time. I'm also going to say adaptability. Can you adapt, and can you adapt quickly? That's going to be key as well. What we see is that some people can actually embrace change later on, but not necessarily in the very beginning. So I want you to really think through, as a leader, Keisha, how is your ability to truly be able to adapt within your team? And it really starts up here, right? It's fostering that mindset that welcomes change and encourages continuous learning. And so that means that, again, you've got to push yourself as well as your team, not just you and not just your team, to continuously learn. What can we actually learn from this? So are you having those post-mortem meetings to see, how did this actually go? What did we learn from this? And what can we apply to what we actually do next? What I see for a lot of organizations is that they are excellent and saying, what do we learn from this? Where do we go wrong? What could we have done better? But do they take those key learnings, those findings, and apply it to the next thing that you're actually doing, the next big project, so that you can actually decrease your time that it takes for you to ramp up and be able to execute? Another skill that is huge, I believe, right now for leaders, that leaders absolutely must master in the changing business landscape, is people skills. You've got to be able to work with people and motivate people of all kinds, and really lead the generations. So some leaders really struggle with identifying, or I would say labeling this person, well, that's a millennial and they like this. All millennials are not necessarily the same. Those are guidelines, right? That's what the data suggests and what maybe has been proven, but not necessarily, that does not necessarily mean that this particular millennial is the same as this particular millennial. So leading through the generations, people skills, getting to really know and understand your people. So what do your people need? Who are they? Do you even know who they are? The ability to be able to relate to others who may not necessarily agree with your idea or your perspective. Can you influence them? Can you still work with people who disagree with you, who think differently than you actually think? So your ability to work with people and not allow, I heard this from a leader years ago, and it stuck with me. Never allow the problem to become more important than the relationship. I'm going to say that one more time. Never allow the problem to become more important than the relationship. And that's key, because when you're working with people, it can be really easy to say, you know what, well, I'm feeling this way, or I'm thinking this, or this happened with this particular person, and now I feel some type of way about them, right? I don't trust them, or I don't like working with them. I don't respect their opinions. I don't, really like what they bring to the table or the energy they carry. And so we can make these generalizations based upon a moment in time and not necessarily understand that even for the people that you actually lead, they may not necessarily be on their best that day. And so giving everyone, I like to say grace, give them grace to have an off day. You never, ever really know what's going on with other people. So seeing yourself in their shoes, putting yourself in really their seat, the seat that they actually sit in. Can you sit in that seat? And do you have an awareness of what's happening when you sit in this particular seat? Because when you are actually doing the work, it could be a totally different lens when you're talking about the work, right? And so your people skills are going to be key, especially this one particular skill, empathy. According to Harvard Business Review, Keisha, 71% of managers rank empathy as one of the most important skills for leaders. Can you empathize? Kind of what we were just saying. Can you put yourself in someone else's seat? Can you see it from their lens? And that really takes you having I'm going to say a deep understanding, or at least a working knowledge, right, of what it takes to get something done. So you may think it's really simple to do X, Y, Z, and it's really easy to say, well, why don't you just do this? Or assume that they haven't done that or they haven't tried that. People skills, it goes back to people skills. And here's why I say that. I remember years ago, I was working on a project and I had this leader who I was partnering with. And the leader would always assume that she was giving me new information that I didn't necessarily know. And the difference was that I chose not to bring her every single little problem that I face. I just handled it, right? I just worked through it. I chose to really be more intentional about how I showed up and I work with my cross-functional peers and how I work with my team. I truly believe that, good news goes up, down, bad news goes up. But with that being said, as a leader, I'm able to work through certain things, and the things that bother someone else may not necessarily bother me. So it's not something that I need to put forward or say, well, this team did this or this person did this. I'm just taking care of it. It's just, a day's work, right? I'm working through it. I'm navigating with it, but I am not here to create chaos or strife or an enemy in the process. And so it's really important to me that I realize that after this, even after this project is over, I may still have to engage and work with these people either here or maybe even somewhere else down the line. And so relationships were important to me. So I wasn't that person who would say, this is happening, so let me go tell my manager this. This is happening, so let me go say this. This person didn't do this. No, let's work through it. Let's figure out how we can actually do it. Let's have an adult workplace conversation, which means that my leader may know that the work is getting done, but not necessarily have a full understanding of what it takes to get the work done. And so sometimes we can make things look really easy We can make things look like there's no expertise required. And so I want you to begin to think about that as a leader. What does it really take to get something done? And then empathize with your team. Perhaps they're working through something with another team, and it's taking them maybe a number of asks. They're escalating to you. They have other stressors that are going on, maybe with other projects or other people or things going on at home. And so it's really important that as a leader, you understand that it is important for you to empathize, put yourself in their shoes, really see things from that perspective. Again, from the seat they're sitting in, what could possibly be going on that's impacting something. And so I want you to think about that. It's really important because it's really, again, you get work done through others, right? You're responsible for getting the work done. You're responsible for the results, but that really comes from you leading your team. And the best way to do that is to empathize with them. That's another thing is solving problems. How great are you at solving problems? And I asked this question, Keisha, because this is a skill that is absolutely needed. How do you solve the problem? How do you approach problem solving? I want you to think about that. Leaders really, when they are approaching problem solving, I recommend that they really think through a couple of things. Creativity. Are you allowing for creativity? Are you fostering an atmosphere of collaboration? And do you have an appreciation for innovation? How do you go about solving the problem? Do you expect them to do it by themselves? Do you give them the latitude and the time that is necessary to be able to really work through others or put this through other people or test their theories? Do you give them the ability to see things from multiple perspectives, to be able to put together, maybe perhaps it's a number of different options, and be able to kind of work through those, or are you expecting for everything to be done at once? So I remember working with a leader years ago, and she really liked problem solving in the moment. And I like to kind of think through my problems, and I can problem solve in the moment, but to get the best possible, I would say, outcome or results of what we were solving for, it really sometimes requires us to really think through it from a number of different lenses, not just how this approaches the quick response, right? Not just how this approaches this team, but what's, again, the trickle down effect. How does this have an impact on maybe training? Who's going to be training on this? Maybe sales. How does this have an impact on servicing? How does this have an impact on the customer? How does this have an impact on supply chain, marketing? And so, again, it's looking at it from a different approach for that particular problem as we're solving it. And not all problems can be solved right there in the moment. Sometimes you need to think through the impact of that to see what's going to be the most cost-effective problem. Sometimes, I remember we were having a conversation years ago with somebody I was working with, and we were talking about a particular problem, and we were making a decision as to, do we want to solve the problem or do we want to risk being sued? And this was a real life conversation that I was having with a high up leader, a vice president in this particular organization. And so we were really thinking through, okay, so what's going to be the best way to solve this problem? Are we able to navigate being sued and come out and still smell like a rose? Or do we want to say, you know what? No, let's go ahead and solve the problem because we don't want to take that risk. And so there were different approaches to solving the problem that we were actually having. And it wasn't something that could be solved just like that with the snap of a finger. And so those are some things I want you to think about when you are approaching how you actually solve problems. Right now, what happened is that the organization and legal made the decision, internal as well as external legal, that it would be better if we were actually sued than for us to solve this problem proactively right then at that time. And so that just kind of gives you an idea of why it's important to look at the different aspects of solving the problem instead of immediately always jumping through what's most obvious. Sometimes we get caught up in what's obvious. Another trait that I would say leaders should need to really kind of think through is one that's so important to me: foresight. Can you predict what may happen? That's huge. Being able to predict what may happen. See, we can always play defense, I like to say, but can we play offense and kind of say, you know what, this may actually happen. If this happens, then this is the impact, or this is what we need to do. This is where the market is trending. And how do I know that? Because I'm looking at XYZ. And so because I'm looking at this, then I know that the market is trending here. If the market is trending here, then this is the impact that it has on our business, our customers, and the way we actually show up in the market. And it can move us from this position to this position, which then has an impact on our revenue and our profits, which then has an impact on, of course, our sustainability of our organization, our employees, morale, turnover, retention, so things of that nature. So being able to predict what's actually happening, can you forecast and see what is trending, what is likely to happen, so you can get out in front of it. And I'm talking about big things here, right? So those big things, as you can see. So for example, I remember with the pandemic, before the pandemic, we were looking at making some really huge decisions and really expanding our team and expanding our market presence. And what happened with the pandemic is we began to see what was happening in Europe and what was happening in Europe, and then looking to see, okay, now this is happening elsewhere. It's happening in this country. Okay, now I'm listening to some people here in the States, some just friends who are traveling, and they've been traveling overseas, and now this is what they're saying. So I predict that something is going to shift that impacts the United States, that impacts where we actually do business. And we need to position ourselves to pause. We need to pause hiring. We need to pause our expansion efforts so we can ensure that we can stabilize our organization, that we don't have to take that hit. You know, maybe it's looking to see, okay, we don't know when we're going to come back into the office. And if we don't know when we're going to come back to the office, what will this actually mean for our workforce? What will this actually mean for our customer service? What will this actually mean for, you know, whatever your different divisions you have within your particular organization? So again, being able to predict that by just really kind of listening and paying attention to what's happening in the news, what's happening in the market. So watching world news, right? And understanding what's happening. Another thing that a lot of people don't really understand, I'm going to give you this secret. There are some people who have a strategic advantage or a competitive edge. And how they have that is because they have tapped into people with keen prophetic insight and they can show them or be able to and have a record of success. Let me say that they have a record of success. And so they can really kind of let them know what's happening, what's poised to happen in the next 3 years, the next 2 years, the next 1 year. If you don't do this, then XYZ will happen. I predict that if you do this, this will happen. This is different from a psychic. I want to be clear. This is different from a psychic. It's not a psychic. It's a person with strategic insight. They have prophetic insight, and they have a track record of success. And they sit on boards at companies, and they're able to use their voice. They're able to use their gift to really be able to position that organization for huge success. And so I want you to think about that. Now, that's not necessarily a trait, right, that everyone has. And that's not a behavior that every leader needs to master for the changing business landscape, but it's something that you can take advantage of, is being able to see who do we actually need, I would say. What type of people do we need? So we need people for the current, and we also need people for the future. And so if we need people who can do the work today, and we need people who can do the work tomorrow, then we need to be able to have an idea of what is going to come, what is happening, It looks like we're having some technical difficulties, so we are going to end. We were pretty much at the end of our time together today anyway. But Keisha, I hope this answers your question. So again, I'm just going to wrap up really quickly. I want you to make sure that as a leader, you are adaptable. I want to make sure that as a leader, that you are empathetic, that you have the people skills that are needed to be successful and lead your teams. I want you to really think through, are you truly a change agent? Do you promote continuous learning and effective problem solving through collaboration with others? And also through, again, allowing for people to think and approach problems differently. What else can you actually do when you think about the changing landscape? Again, being able to predict what is possible, what may happen, and actually become really good at foretelling. I like to say foretelling the future, right? So again, being able to predict what is possibly happening by looking at the news, seeing what's happening in other countries and how this actually impacts your market as well as your industry, and then putting together proposed solutions to help you to navigate through that so your organization is sustainable. Those are some things that you can actually do. I think we mentioned also leading the generations is key, managing ambiguity. I believe we said that as well. So those are key to help you to effectively navigate the changing business landscape. If you would like additional insight or assistance with maximizing potential performance